Okay, we're going to look at the game Torgau, designed by Frank Chadwick and published by Game Designers Workshop in 1974. So we're looking at a very old classic here. And I've had an interesting adventure with this game. A friend and I did try it in 1974. I'd been gaming for about 5 years there. And what we did was we learned the rules, pushed a few counters around. And I remember we played for maybe 15-20 minutes and kind of just gave up on it. We really couldn't see what the designer was trying to show. We found the rules rather complex, and we abandoned it. And I have not looked at it for, 37 years or so? I mean, a long time. So I've got the copy out again now, and I'm looking at it. I'm reading the rules, and I guess I've come a long way in wargaming, because now it seems rather simple, the rules. And for those of you who are familiar with Game Designers Workshop, their rules were designed in what I'll call a minimalistic format. They would have rules cases, and they were done in this paragraph form. They'd explain a concept, for example, Rule 9 formations. There'd be a paragraph with a couple of subcases, and that would be it. The rules didn't have a lot of subcases, so there's a lot of reading in paragraph form. Now, the rules were fairly clear. The designer tells you how to play the game. It's complete, but some of the concepts were so novel for the time, it was hard to understand as to what to do. That's why the game kind of eluded us. Now I'm going to show you the counters first, the pieces, and then we'll zoom in and I'll show you what kind of eluded us back in '74, and I dare say still eludes some people today, because some of the rules, concepts, Frank does not really tell us what to do, and on common sense you can figure it out, but everybody who plays Torgau, you might be wondering, gee, am I playing it the same way as everybody else? We'll get into that. Now, first of all, I'll just explain the situation at Torgau. What is the Battle of Torgau? What the devil you're trying to accomplish in it? Okay, there's the overall map of Torgau, and I'll explain more or less the historical situation. It's 1760, and Frederick the Great is trying to oust the Austrian army from near the fortress city of Torgau. Torgau is just off the board to the right, and the Austrians are in the central position, and it's Frederick's task to oust them. He's trying to destroy their army, get them out of this area. That's the strategic situation. Now, the setup is open. In many ways, it reminds me of Avalon Hill's Caesar Elysia. The Austrians are allowed to set up anywhere on the board, except within 2 hexes of the entry points for the Prussians. The Prussians have 9 entry points, numbered clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way around here. So the Austrians will set up first, and they will not know where or when the Prussians are going to enter. Will they enter on turn 1 from area 1, or turn 2 from area 3, that kind of thing. The Prussians designate their entry points on a piece of paper, which I've done, and 1 hour before the entry time, the Prussians will roll a die to see if the corps arrives on time, arrives an hour earlier, or an hour or 2 late. So there's going to be great variability in this game, which is a very nice feature. So that's the strategic situation. But let's take a look at the counters closely. I'll show you them and try to explain some of the concepts that eluded us back in '74, which seem quite clear to me now. But let's take a closer look at the counters. Okay, the unit sizes in this game are regiments and battalions and batteries, so we're talking about a very tactical game. Now, before us here is a Prussian unit, battalion size, and the upper left shows you the number of steps it has. The 1 is the fire value, and 6 is the movement value. And the number to the far left is the melee value. Now, this particular unit is in column, If you want to show the unit in line, you just merely flip them. And now we have the new values, of course. Melee is 6, fire value is 4, and the movement is reduced to 4. A line indicating that the unit is in line. Again, the stacking value, 2. That's a typical infantry unit. Now the Austrians are much the same. See melee value, fire, movement. This particular unit moves a little bit slower than this one. That's its formation in column, and that's the value when he's in line. The batteries are similar. There's a typical Prussian battery. This gives the melee value and the movement when the battery unlimbers. That will be its melee value. That's its fire value, and that's its stacking value, and that's the range, in this case 6 hexes. So you can see the game is very, very tactical. Here's a typical cavalry unit. Melee value, and of course it can move much faster, 6-10. They don't have a flip side because the cavalry is only in one formation. And there's another typical Austrian cavalry unit. There's all kinds of rules for being in towns. When units enter a town, they enter this formation called general order, which means the men are spread out about the town. So we're talking tactical here, and this is the level of Frederick the Great's battles that I wanted to explore. So this is why I really came back to Torgau. I've got the Frederick the Great by Avalon Hill, which is grand strategy. I've looked at Prussia's Glory 1 and Prussia's Glory 2 by GMT. They look like fine games too, but they are not quite the tactical level I want to explore. Now I'm going to set up some units here and try to show what stumped a lot of people, I think, and because I went on Board Game Geek, I looked at some of the message traffic there, and I can see that there isn't a unanimity of opinion as to how certain things are supposed to work. And I'm going to show you what the confusion is all about. Okay, here we have a typical situation in Torgau. I've just set up 5 Austrian units all in line, and we have 5 Prussian units all in line. Now, like I said, the rules are specific. They tell you what the units can do, but the actual carrying out of the movement is not very well explained, and I'll explain why. Fire is done in the movement phase. That's quite explicit. And the designer mentions that fire, you can fire in theory 4 times in your turn. And to fire costs you a movement point. Example, this unit is 2 hexes away. So in theory, the unit could go 1, spending a movement point, 2, spending a movement point, and he'd have 2 movement points left, which means he can fire twice. Okay, that's quite simple. It also says in the rules that the defender may fire as many times as the attacker had movement points in the hex. So when this fellow expended 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 movement points in the hex, the defender could fire 3 times. That's quite clear. So where's the problem? All right. Where the potential problem is, because I think I figured this out, again, this is just my solution. Your solution might be entirely different, and you might say that, well, the designer doesn't say that at all. Well, let's say you've moved this fellow in, like so. And then you move this fellow in, like so. And just straight frontal attack, he moved in. And he moved in. And let's say he moved in. And let's say you had another fellow over here, and he moved in. Okay. It says that the fire phase takes place during movement. All right, we're during movement. But how are you going to remember what each unit expended in the movement? You'd have to mark where every unit started. You'd have to also remember how many movement points were expended and how many were expended in the hex. Now in Consim, I see some people have mentioned that they use number markers. They throw number markers down to show that this guy's maybe spent 2 movement points on the hex, maybe 3 in this. Well, that's great, but the game doesn't come with any movement markers. And I don't believe that the designer intended that we have to write down the starting position and the end position of every single counter in the game. That wouldn't make any sense to me. So in 74, this kind of stumped us. We didn't know what to do. So I think that's why we didn't spend a lot of time on the game. But I'm pretty sure this is what is intended. And this is what I will do when I play the game, because it's the only one that actually makes sense to me. And it's this. And to me, it's quite simple. It's a simple system that's used in actually SPQR too, the tactical Roman game. I think what is intended, though it's not explicitly stated, that what you do is you fire as you move 1 unit at a time. So in this case, he would go 1, 2, 3, 4. He's spending 2 movement phases here. He could fire twice. This guy, because he expended 2 movement points there, can also fire twice. Now, explicitly mentioned is the fact that fire is simultaneous. The defender does not fire first, nor the attacker. So you roll your die, consult the fire table, and mark the casualties. I think that's what is intended. I think that's the way I will play it, because it just makes sense and it makes the game practical. I don't believe that the designer intended that we need 1 million number markers to play his game. Certainly, the way games are being designed in 74, that isn't the case. Now, by the way, the units you see here on the board are pretty well the units you start the game with. Now, there is step reduction in this game, and you have the step reduction chart. So as units take losses, you replace them with these lower value units. And that's why in this game I have lots of spare counters, but they're actually step reduction counters. So don't get intimidated by the number of units of the game. It's actually quite manageable. So I think that was a little daunting to us back in 74 too. We saw these units and said, oh my God, how are we going to play this thing? But it's not that bad. Now, I explained a little bit about the Austrian setup, and because I don't know the battle all that well, I use this historical map as a guide. This is an actual deployment of the way the Austrians deployed. They deployed on this high ground near Torgau. Torgau is just actually here on the edge. It's missing on this game. We're actually fighting the battle just west of the city. So I used it as a guide, and then I'll have my Prussians enter from various sides. So that's the way I'm going to be playing the game. And I'm not going to shoot the whole game or anything like that. I just wanted to introduce you to the game to show you what it's all about. Now, I'll shoot a portion of the game after I've set up the Austrians and let you know my strategy, and maybe I'll do a summary later. I'm not sure. The main thing was to show you Torgau, this classic old game, and just give you an idea of what it's all about. Okay, I guess I should mention how fire combat works, because I thought that was kind of innovative for the time. We're seeing more concepts like this now, but back in 74 you didn't see it so much. In the old days you kind of just always compared combat factors and went at it, or fire factors, and rolled on a table. That's similar, but he's got some little variations here that I thought were kind of nice. When a unit fires, for example, and let's say in this example each regiment is going to get to fire twice. So the regiment uses its fire value, which is 7, and he compares it to the terrain of the unit, not the unit's defense factor or anything like that. The terrain. And open terrain happens to have a defensive value of 9. So in this case, let's say the 7 was firing, he'd be firing 7 against 9, which is a 1 to 2 on the combat table. And he'd be rolling a die here to see if he inflicts any losses. And I thought there was a fire value halved in the rules when he's firing up a slope. But for the purpose of this demonstration, all I'm trying to show is that you look at the terrain the unit's firing at. So an example, this Austrian unit, if it was firing, it would be 7. Again, on 9, he'd be firing on the 1 to 2 table. But in this case, because I said they were firing twice, they'd roll twice. And this is the way losses are inflicted. And of course, there's various terrain effects. So if the fellow's in a village, he's going to have a defense of 18. So your 7 versus an 18 will be 1 to 3, which actually is right off the chart and wouldn't be allowed. Woods, as you can see, gives you a lot of terrain too. Now this brings up the fire combat, about my individuals firing and all that. Because if a 7 firing on an 18, he'll never be able to fire. But there is stacking in this game. It's limited, but it is there. And you can put 2 units together, so these guys could fire together. I'm assuming they would move together like that. Then you could fire your 14 against, let's say, a village or woods. It would still be a lousy attack, 1 to 2, but at least you can do it. So that's the way fire value combat works. Melee, well, nothing innovative there. We've seen it all before. You actually enter the hex of the unit, then you compare melee values and on a table and roll. So tactically, this game is where it's at for what I wanted to see in Frederick the Great Warfare. Cavalry there's charge rules with limitations. Cavalry has to be a certain distance away. They enter the hex and melee, that kind of thing. So this is a tactical game, and it's workable, it's playable. This is not La Bataille de la Moscova. It's like a small La Bataille de la Moscova. There's enough units to keep the game rather manageable. Well, I'm going to wrap up the video on Torgau. I'm not going to be going through a playthrough because this thing could take hours. I have no idea. I certainly am going to have fun exploring this game because it has so many variables. I think the Prussian entry rules are great. There's going to give you a lot of variability there. I might point out that when the Prussians do their approach march, they break up their army into 4 corps, and there's limitations as to how many units you can put in each corps, and there's your entry points with your variable die rolls for when they will come in. So the entry point rules alone will make this game very dynamic, and I don't think you'll get tired of it. So I'm going to give it a try. I hope this gives you an idea of what Torgau was like. It's a shame that games like this aren't made anymore. We're getting really nice graphics now and terrific looking maps. And yet something is missing. It's hard for me to specify what. I was going to do a video on Prussia's Glory, Volume 2, but I never got around to it because I actually traded that game for Torgau. And I don't regret that I did. I think Torgau seems to be more my cup of tea. Maybe at some point in the future I can do a video of Prussia's Glory 2 to compare the system, but they're a little bit like apples and oranges. One is more operational, this is more tactical. So if you can get your hands on Torgau, it's a very rare game. I think you'll like it if you like tactical games of the Frederick the Great period. Thank you for watching.